Good morning, Illini, and welcome back. I'm Matt Schrock, your host here for Healthy Illini. We are cruising right through this spring semester, and today's topic is one that I think we're going to need all the time for, so I don't want to spend too much time on this intro, but I'm excited for this one. I've been looking forward to it for a long time, actually, and so I hope you're ready to listen and eager to hear about this one. Today, I have two guests who are students here at the University of Illinois. First up, I have a return guest, Atlas Fuller. Is returning, was here last fall on an episode. Atlas is a freshman, although they have junior standing in credits because they do have an associate's degree, but they are a freshman in biology here at UIUC. Atlas, thanks for coming back.
Yeah, thank you for having me again.
And joined also by a first-time guest, Azer Matten is a senior here with a major in science technology and a minor in electric engineering. Azer, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no problem.
So back in October 2022, we did have an episode about allyship and coming out, and that was the first time we had you on Atlas. You were here with a few other staff from campus, but for that episode, I remember very clearly we had a conversation, and during that conversation, we specifically talked about focusing on the interactions with others once a person has established some confidence in who they are and has gone through some of those steps, that journey to find themselves. We said we are not talking about the journey of introspection to find that in any. We're assuming that that's already been done. But today, we're going to backtrack a little bit, and we're going to have that conversation.
Exciting.
Because when we got done with that episode, Jen and I, behind the scenes, were very happy with how that episode went. It was really just such a good conversation that we felt it was important to go back and talk about the first part of that entire idea. And that's figuring out who you are and gaining confidence in that. And so I want to start with both of you, just kind of give us some baseline. I want to hear your story a little bit and to start that conversation. So can you just tell me, you don't have to go real deep and you don't have to share anything that you don't feel comfortable or you don't want to share, but can you just tell me a little bit about your background and how that journey started for you? So Atlas, I'm going to start with you. Can you just give me a little bit of background of where you were coming from?
Yeah, so my name is Atlas, obviously. I consider myself to be a non-binary person, so I do not really conform to the ideas of male or female. I grew up in a very small town, so not a lot of very accepting people there. Now I'm here. That's pretty much it. There's not really a whole lot. I did get my associate of biology last year, actually. And now I'm here studying biology, and I work at a few different labs here. I do a lot of epigenetics research and things like that. I'm having a great time here. It's been a lot of really good things.
Azer, and how about you?
Yeah, so I'm Azer. I'm from a predominantly Orthodox Jewish community in Chicago. I'm currently a senior. I came here to study mechanical engineering originally, but I decided I wanted something more artsy, so I'm studying scenic technology, so a lot of what I do is hands-on building and creation, which is very fun. I grew up in Chicago, but I'm from a very religious Jewish community there, and so coming to college was a very interesting experience for me because it was the first time that I was really surrounded by people of all backgrounds and all religions. The things that I don't know about Christianity will astound you.
And I think, that I only ask that because there will likely be somebody listening who is either on this journey or starting this journey or trying to think about the journey. And I just wanted to highlight that while you both have some commonalities, we talk about this all the time on the show, you have some commonalities in your journey in some of the ideas in your prep work. I saw it there. You mirrored each other in a lot of ways. You come from very different starting points. And that's really important because there are a lot of people that go through, whether it be a journey of identity or a journey of what major do I take or where do I live or what do I like, that often think, well, everybody else comes from this point and I'm starting here and I'm kind of unique. Everybody starts from a different point. And that's kind of what I wanted to highlight in some of that. And we're going to come back to where you started and where you are now. We'll come back to that in the conversation a little bit. But there are two aspects I want to touch on in this conversation: the science and the personal of the journey. And we'll get to the personal in a moment, and what we mean by that. But let's start with the science, or just basic understanding of what gender and sex are, because they are very different. So briefly, and I know briefly is hard to say because
For me, it's like,
Tell us about your entire major and your entire major and your focus of everything in like 30 seconds. But
describe the human genome in as few words as possible.
But basically, just very quickly from describing more as a clinical standpoint, what we're asking for, what is the difference between gender and sex?
So biological sex, this is, or you can talk about this too if you want, but this is like my thing. Biological sex in humans is more based on like the physiological characteristics of a person rather than their internal perception of themselves. So biological sex is largely determined by biological factors such as your genetics, your hormone profile, your environment, things like that, whereas gender is more of a socially constructed idea. So we present as more feminine or as more masculine. There's no genes that necessarily regulate us presenting as a certain way. And that's more what gender is about. It doesn't necessarily have to do with biological sex. They often correlate, however, they are not causal. So they can be very, very different. They can be the same, and in most cases they are the same, but they don't have to be necessarily.
And the reason... Yeah, the reason I wanted to bring that up here is often when someone is talking about gender or identity or sexual preference or whatever it may be, they get lumped together.
Mm-hmm.
But there does need to be some distinction because sometimes it makes a difference. I work in a medical facility.
Yeah.
Biologically, that makes a difference. Someone may come in and they may identify as trans or as non-binary, but as a provider, as a medical professional, sometimes you need to know what that at birth was because certain things affect the body certain ways, and so you need to have that background.
Yeah, it's very important to know.
It's very silly. I have a trans friend who went in and like during their regular checkup, whatever, they're trans masculine and they were like very far along, in a way that an average person wouldn't even know that they had transitioned. And they went in for like a regular doctor's appointment and they got the results back and they were like on the list, they had a prostate exam. And I guess for people who are assigned female at birth, the exam should not have yielded any results, but the results were like, oh, you're good. And they were like, well, now I have to follow up and see what they were actually looking at.
There is no prostate here. Like, so it's really not.
So that understanding is really important. So that's why I want to make a little bit of distinction of not just for that reason, but there is a distinction between sex and gender.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're talking today, a lot of what we're talking about is going to be gender, because we're going to be talking about the internal, the introspective, that figuring out who you are. That side falls more to the gender side. And so that's kind of, I want to make that distinction just to start.
Yeah.
Is that fair? I mean,
that's exactly correct. Yeah.
I make sure we're on the same wavelength here in this conversation.
Yeah.
So like I said, there are two aspects, and the second one is one I really wanted to touch on because I think that's where a lot of people find themselves uncertain. And the second one is the personal. And that's the personal journey of finding where you are. And it can be confusing. It can be intimidating. Because there is no one-size-fits-all formula. As we said before, you both come from very different backgrounds, but you have some common journey. But if I took every step of Atlas's journey and said, all right, Azer, you follow this exactly, it's not going to do you no good.
And I think it's also silly because we both identify as like non-binary, I think more associating with like androgyny, but we come from, I think, like very opposite ends in terms of like where our journey started.
Yeah.
As opposed to like being even like closer, more similar now. Like I feel like we're still,
Let's jump into that if you're okay with it.
Yeah.
Let's so where did your journey start? You started from very opposite ends. What does that mean? You two are friends. You know each other. You kind of know each other's journey. I can kind of tell through the conversation here. But Azer, so how did your journey start?
Well, part of it, I guess, growing up in a very religious community is that when I went to school, I went to a religious private school, and it was also separated by gender for most of it. In high school, a little bit, it was like there was some mixed classes, but for the most part, it was really separate. And so my relation to people, my friend groups, who I interacted with on a regular basis was really affected by that. And it wasn't until I got to college where I was just like interacting, but trying to figure out how to relate to people outside of this very rigid mold. And I know, for some people who go to private school or, public school it's different. I don't know, maybe there's more freedom of choice, but yeah, getting to come to a public university and then being able to start some sort of hormone therapy or change my name or use preferred pronouns, it was a very big adjustment for me.
What about you, Alice?
So yeah, I grew up with like a mix of everyone, and it was all, I got to see all different types of genders. I got to see all, well, not all different types of expressions, but I got to interact with everyone essentially. And I realized from a very young age, like, wow, I do not relate to these people. Like, the boys would be with the boys, the girls would be with the girls, and I was just there. And it was a very strange experience growing up because I never really did fit into one of those categories. So I'm intersex, so I think everyone kind of knew, oh, something's a little wrong with that one. And I wasn't necessarily excluded, however, I was notably different from everyone. And that was a very weird thing growing up. I I can't really describe exactly how that felt, but it was very strange not ever fitting into one category. And now that I'm here, I don't really have to fit into a category. And now that society is changing for the better, in my opinion, I don't really feel the need to fit into a category. So I just exist as myself, whatever that is, and I'm here.
So as you started, like Alice, you said at a very young age, you started feeling like I'm just not fitting into any of these boxes.
Mhm.
Were there questions you were asking? Like one of the things we were
Yeah.
with that is really important, and we kind of talked about in our prep work, was introspection is so important. And so were there questions you were asking yourself, and Azer, you can speak to this as well. Were there things that kind of triggered your thought process of this is, I'm going to start thinking in this direction, or I'm going to start exploring ideas in this other direction? What was that internal conversation like?
It was very interesting for me, and it was a lot of gradual steps. It took a lot of steps to get where I am now. So, like, obviously, when I was growing up, I kind of got pushed to one side of the gender spectrum. I was just kind of like, you have to be this, and anything else is not good. And that was kind of how I was forced to think for a while. But as I was growing up, I'm like, well, is that necessarily true? Like, because somebody else said it, does that necessarily make it reality? Like, I mean, it was part of also when I realized that adults aren't always like right. And I realized like, well, maybe they're not right about that either. And the first thing that like I did was I realized like my sexuality. So I don't have really a gender preference when dating. And I found that out. That was my first step. I was like, why wouldn't I date somebody at the same gender as me? Like, what exactly is stopping me? Like, if I love them and they love me, that really, what's the deal? And I realized there wasn't a deal.
Figuring that out like earlier it's definitely more common than kind of figuring out your gender. I feel like that is something that you'll question maybe when you're more independent and you're allowed to make more choices for each other. Although, especially over COVID, a lot more people are being able to have that sort of introspection. Spending a lot of time at home alone with yourself,
Yeah.
to avoid some truths.
Yeah. No, I get that. Yeah. And that was the first thing for me. It was just like, okay, so I'm this. What if there's like other stuff? Like, what if there's more things about myself that I haven't really realized? Because I didn't even realize that until I was like 15, maybe. I don't know. It was a while before I even realized that I was attracted to people with the same gender as me. So it was a lot of steps. It was a lot of steps. It wasn't just like overnight. I'm like, oh, I'm non-binary. It took a while. It took a lot of like thinking and a lot of like, maybe I'm non-binary. Like maybe that's kind of how I am. Maybe I'm not perfectly one thing. Maybe I'm a little bit of other. Maybe I'm neither. And I still don't necessarily have all the answers. I still am learning more about myself. I'm thinking about myself and thinking, how do I fit into this? Or how do I not fit into this? And I don't think I'll ever have exactly the right answer, but I'm getting a lot closer. I'm getting much closer every day.
Yeah, I think you mentioned this maybe a little bit when we started talking, is that sometimes the boxes that you're trying to fit into are maybe more like they're holding you back as opposed to really trying to do your own discovery. For me, when I was growing up, I definitely spent a lot of time on Tumblr.
Oh, okay. I see how it is.
Yeah.
I see how it is.
So I kind of had, you said it like pretty late. I don't know. I guess I started thinking at least about sexuality, in terms of that I wasn't straight, maybe around 15 or 16 as well. But being on Tumblr, there's a lot of people who are queer, specifically like trans or some sort of gender non-conforming. And I was like, oh, I I relate to these people. I understand their experience.
Yeah.
And even once I had figured that out for myself, I wasn't really in a place to be able to do anything about it. And it was like realizing that, and then, you know, as I was getting older and growing up and giving more agency to myself away from like just a lot of societal pressures or, you know, expectations from people who were close to me, that I was able to start experimenting and exploring. Because
Yeah.
I don't know, I feel like I'm pretty close to where I want to be, but it took a lot of trial and error.
Yeah.
Well, I want to come back to that point. Before we go too far into that, I do want to ask, though, especially in the early steps of your journey, was it solo? Did you have a supportive network of any sort? What was it like for you?
I was actually just about to interject with something. Nobody told me that I should be what I am now. Nobody was telling me like, oh, you're non-binary. Like I didn't have anybody telling me that. There wasn't any outside source. That was all me. That was 100% of the way. Like, I am asking questions about myself. I'm trying to figure out more about myself from my own perspective, because nobody else knows my perspective but me, because I'm me. Nobody else is me. Nobody can tell me what I should or shouldn't be.
In fact, they'll really try and tell you who you should be.
Yeah. The people like to try to tell you, but they don't know. They're not you. They don't have your experiences or your thoughts or anything.
It was like no one's transing their gender just because their friends are doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
You said it just a minute ago that it wasn't a straight line.
Oh yeah.
And so I'm assuming there were highs and lows. There were good days and not so great days.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
So you mentioned trial and error. How did that fit into that whole idea of the good days and the bad days? How did you internally navigate that journey? Because that's not easy. I mean, I don't care who you are. I don't care what you identify as in any way, whether it be internally, whether it be through work or through leisure or whatever. We all like to fit in. Everybody wants to fit in somewhere.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of finding who you are and how that fits. But that can be some rough sledding when you're going through that. So how did you navigate the rough days?
Azer, you want to talk?
Sure. I mean, gosh, starting out, there was a lot of rough days, you know, especially because I was really stuck for a long time in this kind of religious structure where, you know, it was very much women were doing this and men were doing this. So much so that, honestly, they don't really interact much until they get married. And so I had to, you know, wear specific clothes. I had to, we had a uniform.
No.
And I guess coming to college, you know, I didn't actually even wear pants until I came to college. And so doing that was like a huge radical change for me. Something, you know, like small steps, like starting to go by a different name or different pronouns. I'd say that one of the tougher things, you know, along the journey was asking people specifically to use names and pronouns, because that takes a lot of confidence to do. And then even once you do that, a lot of people will still misgender you. I've been on, you know, hormone therapy for over a year now, which is crazy.
Really?
But
I thought much longer. That's crazy.
Yeah, but people still misgender me who knew me before, even though I sound like this. So, but it's gotten to a point, you know, where I'm really comfortable in myself, that enough so that it doesn't bother me as much, especially because it looks really silly for them.
I agree.
Yeah, I was like...
So, Alice, what about you? How did you, the tougher days, how did you navigate those?
I can agree a lot with what Azer said about like just generally society. One thing that was really challenging for me is there's kind of a stereotype for queer people in general that we're less competent and that we're kind of just dumb, you know? And that's hard as a biologist, because people are like, oh, you don't even know like how sex works, like how biology works, because, you know, it's X and Y, it's X, you know, XX, things like that. Like it's very rigid in their minds. And if you deviate from that, well, you must be stupid, because that's basic biology. I do advanced epigenetics, so I think I know a little bit more about biology than most people, but people tend to look at me and like, well, you must not be that smart because you're non-binary or you're this or something. And that was a really big challenge, is getting over that. And the social aspect at like work, the social aspect like when I get published, because I'm getting published very soon for a protocol that I made. And it's going to be a challenge with like how are people going to perceive my work if they perceive me as being very incompetent? So that's something I'm currently dealing with. It's been a bit of a challenge to figure that one out.
Oh man, yeah, especially Alex from the GSRC and I have talked a lot about this, especially because Alex is the assistant director of the Gender and Sexuality Resource Center on campus, and the amount of pushback on just, events or things that he's trying to do is ridiculous. You think that they would just be like, you're a competent adult, you're in this position, you've done all of your education, and we'll let you do the things that you're doing. But it's like being queer, especially in an academic setting, is just adding a little bit more red tape.
Yeah. And one thing I'd like to add too is like when I was first starting to like really come out, it was like, is it worth it to put myself through this
Oh yeah.
in order to like be who I truly am? And I ultimately decided, yes, it is. It was the best decision I've ever made. In fact,
Same. Yeah.
I would do it a million times over, even though it made things a lot harder and I incurred a lot of challenges on myself. It was the right choice, and I'm very, very happy that I made that choice.
So, as again, we don't have enough time to go through everything I want to go through today. Obviously,
Like that's okay.
No, we're good. We're good.
Yeah.
But I do want to get to this thing. In that if somebody's listening, because you're talking about your journeys, if somebody's listening and is identifying a little bit, or is saying, no, this resonates with me at some point, whether I've been on this journey for a while or I'm just starting this journey personally, what advice, maybe one or two things can you say of how to approach it? I know we talked in the prep about what introspection is. We talked about that time is important. But from your perspectives, what are two key pieces of advice that you would give someone who's just starting to think about how to even approach this journey?
Yeah. I would say it's okay to just look inside yourself, just open the door a little bit and just be like assuming you're like a woman, just be like, yeah, I'm a woman, and that's okay. Like you don't have to change. You don't have to change anything. You can just look inside yourself and be like, yep, all good, and continue with life. It doesn't require a change to be introspective. And I would not necessarily abandon all you know about gender to look at yourself, but definitely like you don't have to look at it through such a rigid standpoint of I have to be something. You can look inside and just be like, I don't really know what I am, and that's okay. And you don't even really necessarily have to figure it out fully, but it's good to just look inside and check and be like, yeah, all good, or maybe not all good, and maybe I need to do some more introspection. That's kind of how I looked at it, and it's working out pretty well for me. But yeah,
kind of jumping off that, yeah, I guess don't be afraid to do introspection, and along that, don't be afraid to try new things, because I don't know, there's a lot of trial and error that I had to go through in order to kind of discover what I was comfortable with, discover my fashion sense, and discover how I want to act and what sort of things I was doing in my day-to-day that were because they were things people expected of me, but not things that were making me happy or, were actively keeping me down. But that trial and error takes a really long time.
But that's part of what especially for college students, that's part of what college is trial and error in every aspect. You learn about, what do I have to have in my apartment? What do I like in my apartment? What kind of layout do I like? What kind of foods do I like? And that, I appreciate what you said, Atlas, about the introspection, because introspection, like you said, does not require change. It's about just taking basically a measuring stick or a litmus test, where I'm at. And you both have talked about how you started on your journey, but now you have confidence. Confidence is built over time.
Yeah, it takes a while.
That's what it is. And like, if I asked you right now to be introspective right now, you both would do it in a heartbeat and be like, okay, this is what I know, and these are the things I'm still figuring out. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're being introspective in order to look for what do I need to change. It's just, where am I at? And that's something that I think was really important, because this conversation, even though we are approaching it from a idea of a personal journey where you might not be traditional roles, whatever, the LGBTQIA plus all that. We're approaching it from that side to a degree, but introspection is for everybody.
Yeah,
Whether
very
you
much so.
identify as gay or straight or trans or binary.
Trial and error is for everyone. Yeah, if you,
It's important. Yeah,
like,
everyone should be just like checking, like, hey,
Yeah.
you know, even if it doesn't require change, it's good to just be like, yeah, I'm
all
confident in what I am.
the men who identify out there, you know, as a man, you can still wear a skirt. You can wear anything that's a little fruity. You can own it. And it doesn't mean that you're any less of a man, or if you're a woman who wants to do traditionally masculine things, you know, own it. Just, it can be you, and you could have tried it. It couldn't have worked, but at the end of the day, as long as you're comfortable with yourself, that is ultimately what matters.
And from that side, you know, for me, I am a white, middle-aged, cis, heterosexual male.
Yeah.
That's what I am.
And there's nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly fine.
And I promise you, there's been introspection there. I go, yep, that's what I am.
Yeah.
And I own that, and that's
Yeah.
okay. But I still want to have those conversations. I still want to understand other people's people's perspectives, so that we can have the interaction, because we need everybody. That kind of thing. The other thing that's really important about introspection is that it's continual.
Yes.
Because the introspection you had when you were 15 is not the same introspection you have now, which I hope is not this. I hope is not the same introspection you have at 30. It's not the same at 40, or me a little bit over 40, because, you know, life changes. Because for if nothing else, then the world changes. That the when I was in high school, there was no technology that we have today, so I can't be the same 44-year-old as a 44-year-old in the mid 90s. It's just not possible.
Yeah.
I mean, I could try, but it's not going to work real well. And so you're constantly having to be introspective and say, okay, is this who I am? This is how I feel. This is what I believe. And if you have that confidence and it's been built and it's been tested and you're still that person, then great.
Yeah.
But if there's some things, you know, I can tell you, like I said, I have 3 kids. I have one who's about to graduate high school. I have 2 that are in elementary school. And the parent I was when my oldest was 6 is not the same parent I was when my others were 6, because you change. Some things were the same. Some things were not.
And now you basically have an adult child. Like,
yeah.
they will cut into you. They have no mercy.
Oh, my again, off track a little bit, but my daughter is the best at backhanded compliments. She is. She's been ever since she was a little kid. She was the queen of backhanded compliments. So and I give her a hard time about it now. But anyway, so the last thing I want to touch on, because we are running a little bit out of time. The last thing I want to touch on, though, is if somebody's on this campus specifically and is starting down this journey and just doesn't even know where to start, or doesn't know who to talk to, or doesn't know what to do, are there resources? I know you're both very involved in things on campus. What are some of the resources that you're involved in? What are some resources that you know that are available, especially to UIUC students?
Yeah, I mean, if the best place to start is just the GSRC. That's the Gender Sexuality Resource Center. They got everything.
Say it again.
Gender and Sexuality Resource Center.
Thank you.
GSRC. I slur.
Good. Yeah. It's just for you. You're like, wait, this was it. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
For somebody who's listening who doesn't know, I want to make sure they got that clean. So sorry, go ahead.
That's at the Union. I can't remember what room number, but
323. So it's on the 3rd floor. If you take the elevator or the stairs up there, it's an immediate. You go down the hall, you make a left, and it's all there. Yeah, there's like a bowl of pins and condoms outside.
Yeah, the best place to be. Yeah, there's a bunch of pamphlets out there too that have a lot of information for people that might be questioning. There's a lot of nice people there that will be very happy to talk to you if you're thinking about anything like that. Other than that, do you know anything?
I'm gonna plug Cutes a little bit. Cutes is the campus union for transgender equality and support. They're there for anyone who identifies as transgender or gender nonconforming, or if you're questioning your gender, and even if you ultimately decide that you are not trans or gender nonconforming, it's still a space for anyone to kind of explore those roles. And we got a lot of resources just specifically in our Discord. It's a great community for people who might want to just find other people that they relate to, because I don't know, a lot of people here can come from small towns in Illinois, and maybe they were the only trans or queer person in their school. And being surrounded by other queer people, regardless of what you're going through, is definitely just a nice resource to have, a nice experience to go.
Seeing other people like yourself is very nice. I've loved it. It's been great.
And we'll have those resources listed in our bio as always. But one other one just kind of throw in there that's just always in ours is you can always reach out to us at Healthy Illini. We'll be happy to put you in contact with someone depending on what your conversation you want to have. But there's also a counseling center, and the McKinley has providers here. We'd be happy to have those conversations with you, start you wherever you're at, and help walk alongside. Because as we said at the very, very beginning, everybody starts at a different point. Everybody starts from a different spot, and there's no, well, you have to take this step and this step and this step, and that's how it works. It's a very much a fluid conversation. It's very much a fluid journey, and there is really no step that's the wrong step. Taking the first step is the key of being introspective or talking to somebody or reaching out or whatever it may be. That's really where no matter what it is we're talking about, that's where every journey starts. And that's really what these resources are about, or having, you want to take that first step, we'll meet you there and we'll help walk with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, man, I wish we could have this conversation so much longer. It has been absolutely fantastic talking to both of you. I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing who you are and sharing some of your journey and being vulnerable in that way. So, Azer, Atlas, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I am single, by the way, for all those listening.
Plugging Atlas is single.
Yeah, just letting you all know. I mean, I'm available.
Healthy Illini, folks.
Thought I'd throw that out there.
Or some spicy they them action. Atlas Fuller.
That's me.
You can put your net ID, UIN, whichever it is.
Yeah, we're going to cut some of that.
Okay.
Oh, man.
No, you're good. We talk a lot on here about journeys, and it can be personal, it can be academic, it can be relational, whatever it may be. And today is no different. And everybody on this campus, everybody in the world is on some sort of journey. And if you're listening and you find that today's conversation resonates a little bit, no matter what it may be, please reach out. Reach out to us, reach out to the resources we have listed. We want to walk alongside with you. We don't want, really the reason I started being involved in the podcast is because I don't want anyone to feel alone. I don't want anyone to feel like they have no one to turn to. They have no options to have conversations. And so I really strongly encourage anyone listening to start thinking about introspection, and then find somebody you can talk to about it. Find somebody that you can interact with.
If you're looking for any resources, or you just have random questions about gender, you can also reach out to the Cutes email at cutes.uiuc@gmail.com, and I will get back to you as soon as I can.
But thank you for joining us today. You're on a personal journey no matter where you are in it. You are important and you matter. Your health and wellness are important and matter, and we are here to keep you well to excel. Go have a great week, Illini. Let us know how you're doing, and we'll catch you next time on Healthy Illini.